Hello everyone, welcome to this video discussion. The focus in this video is discourse markers, language, meaning, and context. So in this video discussion, I shall be talking about the role of discourse markers in specific discourses. And also I would like to introduce you to how discourse markers function in a specific language and how they reflect meaning and also how context is unraveled through discourse analysis. So before we proceed to the formal discussion, I have here two discourses or expressions which utilize specific discourse markers. So let us have these analyzed first. First expression here is, it is not the problem. I think the problem is, the presence of undisciplined citizens. And then we also have here the second discourse. So, yes, that is the message of the story. So, I think it is important. And so, the characters could become the protagonists in the ending. Now, if we carefully examine each of these two discourses, we can notice first that there is this existence of discourse markers. For discourse one, you could see that the discourse marker, has been repeatedly used in this expression. One here and then another one here. Same goes with discourse two, wherein the conjunction so is used as a discourse marker as well. And it has been repeated several times in a single discourse only. So if you notice, we have here so, and then another so here, and then another so here. In the world of discourse analysis, we unravel the meaning of discourse markers by focusing on their usage or functionality in a specific discourse. That means in this set of discourses, we can infer that each of these discourse markers has a specific function being played in a given discourse. So that means the expression here is not just a simple expression, meaning it has a specific function, and that function is perhaps the reason why the discourse maker used this in this discourse. So this is the focus of our lesson in this video discussion. I shall be bringing you into the world of discourse markers so that you will fully understand how discourse markers function in given discourses and how they change the meaning or the semantics of a discourse because of their repeated use or existence in these discourses. So the production of coherent discourse is an interactive process that requires speakers to draw upon several different types of communicative knowledge that complement grammatical knowledge of sound, form, and meaning per se, which means that the way we produce discourses, coherent discourses, it actually involves an interactive process. Primarily because here, the speaker or the discourse maker has to make sure that there is an interactive process among several linguistic elements used when producing discourses. For example, if you are the discourse maker or if you are the one uttering the discourse, you have to make sure that all of those expressions which you will be saying will have to complement grammatically speaking. And not only that, you also need to consider the sound, the form, and the semantics of the whole expression itself. So that makes the use of discourse markers complicated or complex. Now, two aspects of communicative knowledge closely related to one another are expressive and social. The ability to use language to display personal and social identities, to convey attitudes and perform actions, and to negotiate relationships between self and other. So here, I am drawing you to a better understanding of the two aspects or two lenses of how we should understand the communicative knowledge, which is closely related to one another. And these are first one, expressive, meaning we use discourses in order for us to express something. And at the same time, it is social because we use discourses in order for us to relate with people around us or within our society. Others include a cognitive ability to represent concepts and ideas through language. So for example, there are also certain expressions which have cognitive or mental representations. And then we also have the textual ability to organize forms and convey meanings within units of language longer than a single sentence. So for example, this one may pertain to the coherent use of different discourses so that there will be one semantics or one meaning being portrayed to another discourse maker. So let's talk about discourse markers. Discourse markers are expressions such as oh, well, you know, and but. But take note, these are not the only discourse markers that we have in the English language. These are one set of linguistic items that function in cognitive, expressive, social, and textual domains, which follows to say that when we talk about discourse markers, they are not just linguistic features. They go beyond being linguistic features. We also need to understand the social functionality of these discourse markers because that is the essence of discourse analysis. So when we analyze these discourse markers, we analyze not only their composition, we also analyze their functionality in a specific expression or a specific discourse and how they affect the semantics in totality. As what I mentioned, discourse markers are not limited only to these that are flashed on the screen. There are also other discourse markers. For example, the frequent use of conjunctions, coordinating conjunctions such as and, so, for, and then the common expressions or phrases such as you know, and other expressions that we commonly use just for us to fill the gaps. Okay? But discourse markers also have different pragmatic uses. We cannot say that discourse markers all the time are just used to fill in gaps whenever people think what to say next or when people have difficulty grasping the next word to say. Because discourse markers are multifunctional, which means they may function differently depending on context or speech situations. So discourse markers may be explored using three different perspectives. First one, we have Schiffrin's discourse perspective. Second, we have Fraser's pragmatic approach. And third one, we have Maslow's interactional linguistics. I'm going to discuss each one of these perspectives. So let's talk about first Schiffrin's analysis of discourse markers. Schiffrin's analysis of discourse markers in 1987 was motivated by several concerns. Schiffrin was interested in using methods for analyzing language that had been developed by variation theory to account for the use and distribution of forms in discourse. This analysis tried to reconcile both methodology using both quantitative and qualitative and underlying models, combining those inherited from both linguistics and sociology. Now, what makes the model or framework of Schiffrin totally different from the rest of the perspectives is the fact that this is actually an attempt to reconcile methodologies which are quantitative and qualitative in nature. So, for example, if you're going to analyze discourse markers in different discourses depending on contexts or situations, Schiffrin suggests that it must, or these discourse markers must be looked at quantitatively and qualitatively. So the analysis goes beyond tallying or identification of different discourse markers because you also need to qualitatively describe the functionalities of these discourse markers in every discourse. Schiffrin's initial work defined discourse markers as sequentially dependent elements which bracket units of talk, that is, non-obligatory utterance, initial items that function in relation to ongoing talk and text. And Schiffrin is very emphatic about this one, most especially in this line, non-obligatory utterance, initial items that function in relation to ongoing talk and text. Schiffrin here interjects that discourse markers are just non-obligatory utterances. Discourse markers could be considered as a set of linguistic expressions comprising members of word classes as varied as conjunctions. So as what I mentioned a while ago, conjunctions may also be functioning as discourse markers in a sentence. Another one is interjection. So for example, the use of O, most especially if it is repeatedly used in discourses, may function as a discourse marker already. And then we also have adverbs such as now and then, and we also have lexicalized phrases such as you know and I mean. Now, these lexicalized phrases are the common phrases that we hear being used as discourse markers in expressions. Also proposed was a discourse model with different planes: a participation framework, information state, ideational structure, action structure, and exchange structure. This analysis shows that markers could work at different levels of discourse to connect utterances on either a single plane or across different planes. So when we understand discourse markers, we look at them not only as markers with sole responsibilities of connecting a single expression with another expression, because sometimes, semantically and pragmatically speaking, discourse markers may also function as connectors of a lot of expressions used in a single discourse delivered towards another discourse maker. For example, a paragraph-long discourse may also contain a lot of discourse markers. For example, in this set of expressions or discourses, for example, 1A, yeah, let's get back because she'll never get home. In this sentence, we can understand that the word because was used to connect a request, to complete a task, and the justification for a request. Whereas on the other one, and they shouted at Henry because they really don't know. Here, it is clearly established that the use of cause, which is a shortened version of the word because, is to connect two idea units or representations of events. So here, we can clearly distinguish a word which functions as a conjunction and a word which functions as a discourse marker. So when we talk about this, in this context, when we talk about discourse markers, because here in the first sentence may refer to a subordinating conjunction connecting two ideas, one that is independent and second one is dependent. But in the second expression, and they shouted at Henry because they really don't know, cause here has a specific pragmatic function or semantic use, which means cause does not necessarily function here as a subordinating conjunction. Here, it's used or it was used to connect two idea units or representations of events. So in this context, we can consider cause here functioning as a discourse marker rather than a conjunction, a subordinating conjunction. Let's have another example. Let's have here a line delivered by Jack. The rabbi's preached, don't intermarry. But I did say those intermarriages that we have in this country are healthy. But here connects an utterance defined on several different planes simultaneously, and hence relates the different planes to one another. Now, if we look carefully at the set of these interaction or conversations, we can see that there are actually a lot of units involved. For example, here, the rabbi's speech, don't intermarry, there are already two units involved in this discourse alone. And then, but I did say those intermarriages that we have in this country are healthy. There are again two units involved. So if we look at this one, there are four units involved in these discourses. And here, the word but, which is originally functioning as a coordinating conjunction, functions more of as a discourse marker. Why? Because this does not actually connect two dependent or independent clauses. Rather, this one simply connects the ideas that are presented here in the first set of units and then the remaining preceding unit here, but I did. So clearly, in this sample, we can say that but functions not as a coordinating conjunction, but more of as a discourse marker. Aside from the one I mentioned, Fraser's perspective on discourse markers is also embedded within a larger framework that impacts upon the analysis of markers. This framework concerns the meaning of sentences, specifically how one type of pragmatic marker in a sentence may relate the message conveyed by that sentence to the message of a prior sentence. In contrast to Schiffrin's approach, Fraser's approach is totally different because Fraser's starting point is the classification of types of pragmatic meaning, and within that classification, the description of how some pragmatic commentary markers signal a relation between the discourse segment, which hosts them, and the prior discourse segment. So this is what Fraser is emphasizing. Fraser here would like to stress that discourse markers function as a sort of a signal, okay? Meaning it shows us the relationship between the discourse segment, which actually contains the discourse marker, and the prior discourse segment, which comes before the host discourse segment. So Fraser's framework heavily depends upon a differentiation between content and pragmatic meaning. So there are two meanings being suggested by Fraser here in the context of his framework. Content meaning is referential meaning, a more or less explicit representation of some state of the world that the speaker intends to bring to the hearer's attention by means of the literal interpretation of the sentence. So when you say content meaning, This suggests that it is actually what the meaning suggests literally, okay, based on how it is used in the sentence. On one hand, when you talk about pragmatic meaning, this one concerns the speaker's communicative intention. So this is the implied meaning, the direct, okay? It's actually the direct meaning which is being suggested towards another discourse maker. This is the message the speaker intends to convey in uttering the sentence. It's the intended meaning of the discourse marker. So there are three different sets of pragmatic markers as suggested by Fraser. First one are basic pragmatic markers, which which are considered as signals of elocutionary force. For example, the word please, okay? And then another one, we have commentary pragmatic markers, encoding of another message that comments on the basic message. For example, frankly, honestly, actually, well, okay? So these adverbs may function as commentary pragmatic markers if they encode another message which comments on the basic message. And then we also have parallel pragmatic markers, which involves encoding of another message separate from the basic and or commentary message. For example, the use of these words, which also include vocatives. Now, Maschler focuses on the process of meta-languaging. This one is another perspective because the focus here is on interactional linguistics. The term builds on Bateson's concept of meta-communication in 1972 and on Becker's 1988 distinction between language and languaging, a move from an idea of language as something accomplished to the idea of language as an ongoing process. According to Maschler, languaging is always performed at two levels of discourse. One can use language to look through language at a world on perceives to exist beyond language, but one can also employ language to communicate about the process of using language itself. So here, we are talking about how language is used in itself and how it functions in itself. And we are also looking at how the language is used as a specific expression, okay, most especially in the context of interactions or conversations. For an utterance to be considered a discourse marker, it must have a metalingual interpretation. This is what Maschler suggests to us. It must have a metalingual interpretation in the context in which it occurs. Rather than referring to the extralingual realm, discourse markers refer to the realm of the text, so the text in itself, to the interpersonal relations between its participants. So primarily, we also need to consider the communicative event, the interaction between discourse makers during the conversation or the interaction, and or it could also be their cognitive processes, the way they mentally represent all of these discourses uttered during that specific speech event or communicative event. For example, we have here doctor's order, then I gotta tell you, and then we also have here another set, what happened to brother mine. So we have here actually the original language, what happened to my brother, go on. Half a year before the draft to the army, smashed his leg. He smashed his leg. Then we have here another expression, wa. Now, if you notice here, we have the use of the discourse marker which suggests that there is this hesitation prior to the information being provided in the succeeding discourses. And then you also have here the existence of another discourse marker, which also suggests hesitation, and then completely smash the ankle in three places. 1 sec. How? Did a flip in the air, and then he's, as you know, in the capoeira and the ninjutsu and all the nonsense, this one. And then we also have another okay. And then we also have here O. Okay, the O could also be another feeler because instead of actually saying the response or the expected response, Meshi here opted to use O to replace the actual expression or discourse. And then okay here may signal as an affirmation. And so the prolongation of this one in this context may also signal that this one is a discourse marker. Okay? Like that. Okay? Now, in different discourse markers also function depending on the situation of the speech event. So when analyzing discourse markers, it is very essential that you understand the context first or the nature of the interaction so that you would really understand whether or not the discourse marker is functioning really as a discourse marker given the context of the situation. Because sometimes we might not notice that there are some words which are actually functioning as lexical items in these expressions and not as discourse markers. And when we realize that these are already functional as discourse markers, that's when we be able to tell that these discourse markers really have specific functions depending on the context of the situation of the interaction, the conversation, or the communicative event. So, in the LMS, I will be sharing a study which is related to the discourse study of discourse markers in the Filipino language. So if you have any question, kindly post your question in the open forum in the LMS, and then I would gladly answer or address each one of them. Thank you very much for watching this video discussion.